Well, let's bring in Dr. Stephen Nash from FIIG Securities off the back of all of that. Dr. Nash, welcome to you. It's almost as if, like, you could say, well, you've got to plan for the unexpected, which always happens. And as a student of history, Ben Bernanke's kind of clutching at straws with all those excuses, is he not?
Look, I think they're in a difficult position, the Fed, at the moment. As you say, they keep on repeating the same thing. Every time they come out, they revise the forecast, and they're always revised one way, and that's not up. I think right now, also, you know, the recovery was emerging before the budget wrangling really got going earlier this year. That's really derailed that emergent growth pattern in the US. And I think the European crisis is another possible cause of derailment. So I imagine the Fed are looking pretty closely at this situation. You saw that there was one supporter of immediate action, Evans, who's been quite vocal for quite a while about the need to stimulate growth, and I imagine others will join him. And there has been commentary by others, for example Yellen, in the last few weeks about the necessity to do something in addition to existing stimulation. So I think the case is building all the time here.
The question would be, the case might be building, but what is the trigger? And one thing that's been remarked on overnight, and wanted to see whether you agree on this, that now there's a departure from the, I suppose, default position, which is to look at GDP growth, look at that nominal print and target your policy response accordingly. Now RBC's senior economist Jacob Obina saying there will be that reversion to the traditional metrics of unemployment and inflation, which is picking up. Do you agree with that?
Look, I think in terms of unemployment, that keeps on being repeated by various commentaries from various US officials that they're not happy with the current level of unemployment. They've got to improve that, reduce that quickly. They've had various policy initiatives to try to move that, and nothing's really happening. So further stimulation has to be, I think, has to be given to get that unemployment rate moving down faster than it is. I think the unemployment rate keeps on featuring in a lot of commentary, and I think it will continue to feature as long as it stays where it is. That's why I think the employment figure at the end of this week is going to be very important. Something over 100,000, maybe even up to 150,000. Might get the market interested in the idea that there's some recovery happening there, but it's still not enough.
Well, yeah, the question would be when, based on past performance, might the Fed come out and start tightening? The suggestion being that the unemployment rate, the Fed would normally wait until it sinks to at least 1 percentage point from the natural unemployment level. Yeah. Right now that's considered around 6.5%, but it's forecast, I guess, right up to 2013 to stay stubbornly as high as 8. Yeah. So it's a long time to wait.
Talk of tightening, I mean, investment banks have been talking about tightening for the last, 3 years. Nothing's happened. If anything, the Fed keeps on saying that they're going to continue to keep policy quite stimulative for the foreseeable future, with those that unemployment situation pretty diabolical, basically. So I can't see any change until that unemployment rate starts falling. We've got to get jobs growth of over 200,000 a month, and that's got to continue for quite a while before we even start talking about tightening.
Right. Well, listen, let's try and bring it all home for viewers and understand any kind of parallels with the Reserve Bank's moves this week, particularly on jobs, because it featured in the reasons given for a cut in rates. What kind of an approach is the RBA adopting now when it looks to our rising unemployment, picture?
Look, we have had an uptick in terms of unemployment. I don't think it's anything to really get too concerned about. I think the RBA have, as they've said, had a mildly restrictive policy stance for quite a while. Given the changes in the underlying rate of inflation that have been delivered over the recent past, that stance just doesn't seem appropriate given that slight weakness in the economy. So it is a slight weakness. It's nothing really to get too concerned about. Talk of easing will have already affected some of the sentiment indicators in the economy. Retail sales may already be affected by that. Getting some readings today on that. So I think that the talk of unemployment here is probably a bit overblown, and the RBA, I think, are just moving back to a more neutral stance, which may may mean further cuts, but not 3 or 4. I think maybe 1, possibly 2 cuts. That's about it at this stage. Really depends on how the data comes out going forward.
Well, yeah, is it more, so to your mind, it's more data dependent, what, domestically versus what even is happening even as we speak, and that's international volatility?
Look, I think it's all very interrelated right now. The European situation is just weighing on sentiment globally. You know, we can't ignore what's going on globally, and in terms of developed world growth, you know, it's looking quite weak. European contraction in the fourth quarter looks pretty well locked in right now. What the ECB does tonight, it's an open question. I probably expect some sort of move there. But, you know, we can't ignore what the problems are overseas, and I think that's going to affect what the RBA does, yeah.
When you look at those PMIs, particularly, you know, from Germany down, but then you get to sort of in the second tier of economic firepower like Italy, and it's pretty ugly. Yes, we had another reading last night on the Italian situation, the economy looking weaker than expected, and, you know, the problem for Europe is growth. It's, you know, what the Europeans have done is tried to attempt some sort of financial stability and prioritise that ahead of growth, but the underlying problem for Europe is growth, and there hasn't really been a response there at the moment. I think that the only way to improve the situation is to increase productivity, which means wage cuts and other things in Europe, but they're not being discussed right now. Are they kind of almost getting, well, they're getting blinded by this idea that they must act on, for instance, bank reform? And Mike Smith was only telling me last week, and it's timely because they're out with their numbers today, that the unintended consequence of too much regulation is simply that the whole system freezes up and no one lends and no one therefore gets growth. It's
very similar to what happened in the US. The Dodd-Frank is probably a bit over the top and causing problems. The Bank of America going into the triple B range. So, look, I think it's an overreaction in terms of the bureaucrats trying to overcorrect from previous problems, yeah.
Dr. Nash, as always, and this story even occurs as you're speaking, global developments swirl and cause plenty of fresh concerns. Thank you for now. Dr. Stephen Nash.
Thanks.
There from FIIG Securities.
Thanks,
just to bring you up to